always look to the sky. The Dr. Sky Experience is on the air. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
Once again from the Powerhouse Blowtorch, Talk Radio 77 WABC, warming up your weekend here on the airwaves and broadcasting from the center of the universe, New York City, to the nation, the world, and I'm quite confident, out to the cosmos. Welcome to another iteration of the Dr. Sky Experience, as we like to talk about critical thinking with great dialogue with you and great guests. If you're a first-time listener, thank you for spending the time with us. Time well spent, as many have said. Great guests from the realms of astronomy, space, aviation, weather, celebrity guests, and stories of American exceptionalism. We like to call the dialogue for the 2 hours Theater of the Mind, because obviously you're not seeing the pictures, but you're creating those in your mind. The contact number, as always, is 1-800-848-9222. That's 1-800-848-WABC. And we thank sincerely our helmsmen, Tony and Bill, who work hard and navigate this powerful signal from New York City to the world, and I'm sure, as I mentioned many times, out to the cosmos. Tonight's adventure, as we kind of think back on some of the great accomplishments of the Artemis II mission from NASA, and I'm hoping, at least I hope right now, that everybody has had an opportunity to at least see this incredible journey, traveling some 25,000 miles, entering the Earth's atmosphere, and going from a speed of about Mach 30 and maybe more to a safe descent into the ocean at some 19 miles per hour. Total mileage traveled by the astronauts, 694,481 miles. Do you have a vehicle out there that's driven that far? We'd love to hear that story, too. But to be more on measure, two great guests in hour number one and also in hour number two. Talking about, first, how do we survive in space? How do humans endure the great missions that are to come? And great success with, of course, Artemis II. But what about them landing on the moon, moving on to the planet Mars, and human habitation of outer space? Some of the questions are posed like this. How living in space will affect future generations and what the potential unintended consequences of space settlements are. We are on the cusp of a golden age of space travel, in which for the first time it will be possible for large numbers of people to venture into space. Some intend to stay. But what happens and what will happen to us in the extreme conditions of space? What should space tourists expect to happen to them during a journey to an orbiting space station, the moon, or Mars and beyond? What would happen to children born on another planet? Would they evolve into a new species? In Becoming a Martian, Dr. Scott Solomon explores the many ways in which humanity's migration into space will change our bodies and our minds. And a brief background on our special guest. Dr. Scott Solomon is a teaching professor at Rice University in Houston. He is also a research associate at the Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of Natural History. He's the author of Future Humans and named a 2017 Best Book by the American Association for the Advancement of Science. He is also the proud host of the podcast Wild World with Scott Solomon and co-writer and co-producer of the series Becoming Martian. Let us now go to our special guest, Dr. Solomon. Good morning, and thank you for joining us.
Happy to be here.
Well, I'm always happy to have guests like yourself, sir, because what a perfect timing, at least from the part of this book and also the great successes of Artemis II. Your feelings on that whole mission, give us your summation, because many people were lost for words that America has finally done something it hasn't done in over 53 years.
Absolutely. I mean, this was an incredible mission from beginning to end. And I think, in some ways thinking about it as a return to the moon or repeating what Apollo had done, I think is actually missing the mark, because yes, this was a mission that orbited the moon in a way that is similar to what happened during the Apollo era. But it was also so much more. For one thing, this was the furthest distance that any humans have ever traveled. So the path that they took around the moon took them farther than anybody ever has gone, including those Apollo astronauts. So, that aspect of it is truly remarkable. And then, what the purpose of this mission is to really establish the ability to not only land on the moon again in 2028, but to be able to build a base, a permanent infrastructure on the moon. And that is so different from what happened during Apollo. So, there's just so much about this mission that was fascinating, exciting. But ultimately, for me, the thing that I think most resonated with me was watching and listening to the 4 astronauts, the crew of Artemis 2, and the descriptions that they gave of what they were seeing and feeling. And that human experience, to me, was what really made this mission so special.
Absolutely, and it's a privilege and honor to have you here, because I'm sure many people here will have questions about the whole problematic thing of being in space. The astronauts seem to make it simple, but as we move on to the stars, obviously your book goes into great detail of that. But as a proud member and alumni, of course, and continuing as a professor, I should say, at Rice University, let's take our people and the listeners of the radio show back in the time capsule to September 12, 1962, President Kennedy's speech about we choose to go to the moon, not because it's easy, because it's hard. You should be very proud of that, because right there, at the football stadium, that
That's
historic
right.
event happened where it all started. Describe that and the power that has to people who are there at Rice University. They should be very proud of that.
Well, we are very proud of that. It's a really important part of Rice's history, but it's an important part of our nation's history and of the history of the achievement of humanity, right? I mean, this was such a pivotal moment in our species history. One of the things that I think is really interesting is just a little detail of something that happened in that speech. We all know the line about we choose to do these things not because they're easy, but because they're hard.
Right.
If you actually listen to exactly what he said and what was the list of things that we choose to do, that we choose to do because
right.
Because they're difficult. He mentioned, fly across the Atlantic, climb the highest mountain, and then he said, "Why does Rice play Texas?"
Yeah,
and he added that. He just added that. He actually wrote it in pencil ahead of the speech because he, the politician that he was, he had to, get the local crowd excited. So yes,
right.
Of course, that is something that we are very proud of at Rice, and it really was the impetus that brought that generation to the moon by the end of the century, by the end of the 1960s. Yeah.
That's great, and you being proud of Rice University, but many people hook 'em horns, right, in Texas. Obviously great rivals with the sports teams, and they're also a powerhouse, too, but that's for another discussion when we talk about the sports of the world, which we rarely do, but a powerhouse nonetheless. Your opening introduction.
I'm an alum of the University of Texas, so I'll come right back with you. Yeah, that's where I did my PhD. That's right.
You got both sides covered, my friend. This is interesting. In your book, you describe this relationship to the Brazos River and the journey. Talk a little bit about that, because it's your journey, and it's a journey that I want to get into, and we're already getting callers right here, and I want to get as many people on. But, more to the focal point of the interview, people, of course, can give us a call, 1-800-848-9222. And the topic for this hour, ladies and gentlemen, is how are we going to endure the hardships of space, as President Kennedy alluded to back in 1962. Why do we do these things? Not because they're easy, but because they're hard. But describe that. You talk about the Brazos River right there in that whole Houston area. That navigates to the story of what? Navigating to the stars, and your purpose in talking to us today.
That's right. So in the very beginning of the book, I described this canoe trip that I took down the Brazos River, not far from here in Houston. And for me, this was really powerful because this one spot in the Brazos River has this rocky area, which, normally the Brazos, throughout the whole Brazos River, it's very muddy, but this one spot is rocky. And it's rocky for a very important and interesting reason. Those rocks are the leftover remains from the tsunami that was generated 66 million years ago when the asteroid struck the Earth and led to the mass extinction event that wiped out the dinosaurs and so much of other life on Earth at the time. And you can still see that event preserved in the rock at the base of this river. So for me, going and actually getting to see that and touch it and kind of try to imagine what it was like to be on Earth at that time. I mean, it would have been horrifying. But the point for the book and for our discussion is to recognize that there have been times in the history of the Earth in which much of what was alive at the time got wiped out. And we know that those types of events are going to happen again. It's a matter of when, not if. And so that kind of sets up this argument for, well, how do we, prevent that, or how do we ensure that we as humans and that life in general will continue on? And one way to do that is to spread out amongst the stars and to not be living only on one planet. By being multiplanetary, we might be able to increase the odds that we survive such a disaster should it happen again.
Amazing. Our special guest on the Dr. Sky Experience for hour number one, Dr. Scott Hamilton, author of the book, Becoming Martian, and we'll go into the subtitles later. But the big question of the hour would be, are humans still evolving, and how do we deal with space? Early in the game, let's go to the callers here as we welcome the callers. Line number one, we've got Max from Manhattan. Max, good morning. We're getting into the conversation. Your questions or comments to Dr. Solomon.
Hello.
Go ahead there, sir.
Are there any
I'm sorry, you're going to have to speak louder or you'll have to call back because let me give it another try. Go ahead, Max from Manhattan.
Is that a little better?
It sure is, sir. Go ahead, please.
Great. From what I understand, the main purpose of taking this trip was to photograph the dark side of the moon. There seems to be something mysterious as that wasn't photographed before. So what were we aiming towards, and what did we photograph?
Very good question.
Right. So, as the caller pointed out, the astronauts were able to get some absolutely incredible photos looking at the moon from the side of it that we never see, because the moon, the way that it is sort of, we say, tidally locked. It basically, the same side of the moon is always facing the Earth. And so we don't ever get to see the far side of the moon. And when the astronauts went around it as part of their mission, they were able to both see with their eyes and photograph that side of the moon. And as part of that, they actually saw and named two craters that had not previously had names, which was a pretty cool thing. So I think there's a lot of science questions that the folks at NASA are interested in addressing with those observations. And from what I understand, that's data that's going to take some time to analyze. But it wasn't really the main mission or the main purpose of this mission. It was really about testing this spacecraft and finding out whether it is indeed suitable for humans to occupy. In the first Artemis mission, Artemis 1, they sent a similar spacecraft on a similar trajectory, but without a crew on board. It was of course quite different. So I think my understanding is that basically they were taking advantage of the fact that they were going to be going around it with a crew there, took some photos, made some observations, hoping to get some interesting data from that. But it wasn't really the primary purpose of the mission, if that makes sense.
Well, very well said, Doctor. And Max, if you're with us, I wanted to add something, too, because I'm a regular lunar observer for like 40 years. And every so often, the moon moves a little bit east and west. And in this particular case, Max, one of the areas that the astronauts actually saw was this giant ring crater called Mare Orientale, meaning the Orient Sea. And around it, I've seen it in telescopes, there's a region of mountains called the Rook Mountains that are somewhat maybe even higher than Mount Everest. So they got to see that with shadow relief, where the sun was rising or setting. And that totally is incredible. But Max, that's an amazing series of questions or comments. We do appreciate you being part of the Dr. Sky Experience. Early in, as the callers are coming in, let's continue on line number 2 and welcome Pete from Staten Island. You're on with Dr. Scott Solomon. How are you doing this morning?
All right, great. I was glued to the TV set.
Awesome.
When we had the space program, I'm 70, so I was in my early teens, and I was so excited with it. And then when it stopped, and I hear all these people, wasting money. It's not a waste. What they explore and the things they find out is going to help us medically and a lot of other things, that's going to contribute to us, and it was absolutely fantastic. I was glued to the seat watching and praying that everything would go
awesome,
perfect, and it did go perfect.
Dr. Pete brings up some excitement. I love it. Your response, Doctor? That's fascinating to hear what he had to say.
Well, I agree with the caller. I mean, not only was it exciting and mesmerizing to watch and follow along and cheer on the successes that the crew and the whole, NASA team were having. But yeah, the thing about going to space is that throughout the history of, the space program, there have been all sorts of really important and interesting spin-offs, developments in technology that have helped us here on Earth. So, we learn a lot from going to space. We learn a lot about space. We learn a lot about the Earth. But we also are able to get benefits in terms of technologies that, there's a lot of medical technologies, for example, that came about as a result of the space program. And I fully expect that to continue to be the case. And actually, if I can, I might just mention briefly one of the really interesting science experiments that was a part of this mission, actually, which is a science experiment called Avatar. And what they did was they basically took a blood sample from each of the 4 crew members before the mission began, and they used those blood cells to basically create stem cells. Stem cells are cells that can develop into any type of cell in the body. So it could become a brain cell or a liver cell or a heart cell or a muscle cell. And what they were able to do is create bone marrow stem cells. And that is really fascinating because that basically gives researchers a way to look at what is actually happening to those cells as the spacecraft made its way around the moon. So they're going to be able to, now that the mission has returned, the researchers will be able to examine those cells and understand how did the environment of space actually impact the cells of those actual astronauts. And if that works well, in the future, we could send that kind of cells on a chip type of experiment out even if there's no crew on the mission. So if we send a probe to Mars, or next time we do, we could potentially send these cells on a chip, this type of an experiment. And that will give us a way to understand what's happening to the people without even sending people.
Well, Pete from Staten Island, your enthusiasm is very powerful, and we appreciate calls like that, like from everyone. 1-800-848-9222, a short but interesting introduction of Dr. Scott Solomon, his new book, Becoming Martian. And the whole focus of this hour is talking about how will people survive in space. And in his book, you have 8 chapters. We'll get into some of them as time will permit, all the way from space medicine, space babies, and not to be overly ridiculous here, certainly not. How does sex happen in space? That's also another serious concern for many people.
It is.
And exactly how we move out into the universe, which is very good. Again, 1-800-848-9222. Let's continue with the calls. We go to line number 3, all the way out here in Arizona. We welcome Tony to the conversation with Dr. Solomon. How you doing, Tony?
Good. Thank you, Dr. Sky. I wanted to go towards the moon and the base they want to build, at least talking about building, to exist on the moon. Now, obviously they can land compartments, modular, they have to have openings that they'd be able to connect to each other, over a period of time, building and building and building.
Yes.
But how are they going to be able to put these things together without having something that looks like a large lunar rover that, has all the attributes of like a forklift, a backhoe, and, same as like a tractor trailer to be able to load these things up that come in a landing area? They can shuttle them over to where they're going to be the base and then hook them all together, or at least hold them in position. Yeah. Even though they're lightweight, they're still huge. How are they going to be able to move these things around so the astronauts can actually couple them together?
Well, great habitation questions, Doctor. Here we go with the architecture of how do you build these habitation modules. This is not an easy task for even some on the Earth. It's a thing of getting all permits and all kinds of things, but I don't think there's any HOAs on the moon at this point, right?
Yeah, this is going to be a real challenge. Well, I think the caller makes some good points that, you need not only the habitats themselves, but the construction infrastructure, right? So, of course, these are problems that NASA is going to be working on now that they've really announced that this moon base is happening. I don't think they've released that level of detail yet. It would be great if we learn more about the plans for how to actually build this base. I expect we probably will be hearing more of those details in the months and years to come. But I think the point is correct that we will need to have construction infrastructure. Some of that may be robotic, right? So yes, we're going to have crews there eventually, but yeah, in the initial stages, a lot of this may be achievable through robotic technologies, and that will prevent us from having to have people up there before we really have the infrastructure to keep them safe.
Well, as we continue on the Dr. Sky Experience with Dr. Scott Solomon, we'll get into these subjects in depth about Mars missions. How long will they take? What are the space hazards? What are the medicine issues? And also habitation modules. Thank you, Tony from Phoenix. Let's go to line number 1 now and closer to the New York area. Let's welcome Silvio in New Jersey. You're on with Dr. Scott Solomon. How you doing, Silvio?
I'm good. How you doing, Steve?
Doing well.
I just wanted to ask a question about, you're talking about building on the moon. How do we protect the people that are going to be up there from asteroids, meteors, and so forth?
Great question.
Yeah, that's right. There's a number of things like that they're going to have to be providing protection against. So impacts from, asteroids, meteors, that is an issue. And actually, one of the things that was amazing during the Artemis 2 mission, during the eclipse that the astronauts were able to witness, in which, from their perspective near the moon, the sun was behind the moon, and that made the surface of the moon that they were seeing appear dark. And they actually noticed several impacts during that brief amount of time that they were seeing it. They saw flashes of light. And so we know that this does happen. The moon doesn't have an atmosphere, really. And that is one of the things that protects Earth to a certain extent from impacts from meteors. Of course, they still do impact us, but typically they'll burn up in the atmosphere unless they're very large. So that is an issue on the moon. One of the ways to provide some protection against that is to basically go underground or to bury your habitat in the Martian soil, what we call the lunar soil, the regolith of the moon. And so that might be one of the most effective ways if you're going to be up there for a while. The longer you're there, of course, the higher the odds of having an impact like that. And so I would expect that they're going to be doing something along those lines of piling up some of that moon dirt, the lunar regolith on top of the habitats.
And also, as I understand, Doctor, using some of those already existing craters like caves where you could easily build something, well, maybe not easily, but it would be better to shield that, with that type of an environment against some of the harsh, sunlight and radiation. Silvio, if you're with us, you get an opportunity to ask another question. If you're still with us, please continue.
Yeah, I'm still here. That's pretty much, answers the question. Just like the doctor said, there's no gravity, to slow down the asteroids and meteorites that protect us here on Earth. The direct hits would probably be a lot more substantial up on the moon's surface and on Mars than down here.
Silvio, appreciate your contributions to the Dr. Sky Experience. Last comment, if you want to comment from what Silvio was saying, Doctor, and then we'll move forward.
Yeah, so just to clarify, so it's the atmosphere of the moon that would be protecting it from meteors or asteroids, or really the lack of an atmosphere. The moon does have gravity. It has about 1/6 the gravity of Earth, and so that's substantially less than what we experience, but more gravity than what the astronauts are experiencing in low Earth orbit, like we see on the International Space Station, and what we saw the Artemis 2 astronauts experiencing while they were in their spacecraft.
1-800-848-9222 or simply 1-800-848-WABC. How convenient, ladies and gentlemen. If we haven't gotten to Joan from Manhattan and Robert in Philadelphia and everybody else calling, just as soon as we complete our break in just a few moments, we'll do our very best to get everybody on here to ask their questions. Wouldn't you say, Doctor, about a most momentous time in history? I think it brings great inspiration and positivity to a world, well, I guess we simply can't all get along down here. Maybe through things like your book, we'll learn about space medicine and all types of different things. But let's segue into the next half hour with you and some of the topics that we'll get into. I'd like to go into the whole concept of what it would be like on a mission to Mars, the duration, and the things that people need to know about. I mean, space radiation, I understood. Many people are saying we never went to the moon. You've heard these things because they never could survive the intense radiation of the Van Allen belts. Now, that's not necessarily true at all, but you've got about a minute and a half to start that, and then after that we'll continue after the hard break. But your response to the radiation belts, it looks like we've done a little bit with this mission quickly, but other Apollo missions did the same thing and nobody died.
Sure. So just real quick, the Van Allen radiation belts, as your your listeners may know, is this region of space that is formed by the Earth's magnetic field. And that is one of the things that protects us on the surface of Earth from the radiation of deep space, solar radiation, galactic cosmic rays. And when you travel through the Van Allen radiation belts, there's trapped radiation in that zone. So it's not a place you want to linger and spend much time. But the Artemis II crew, much like the Apollo astronauts before them, are traveling very rapidly through that region of space. So, yes, they have to pass through it, but they're not spending much time there. So that kind of helps to minimize the amount of radiation that they're exposed to as they pass through.
Absolutely. And again, I keep hearing this. Many of my friends, I mean, I lecture on these subjects like you do, both here on the radio and television, and even regular personal, appearances in front of seniors and other young people in schools. And we keep hearing that same thing. We never went to the moon. But without a long, lengthy response because of the time permitted here and the lack of it, it's incredible how many people could believe that we never went to the moon. And haven't you heard, Doctor, so many people think the Artemis mission was a fake. That's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, I guess people like a conspiracy theory. And fair enough. There's a lot of fake imagery and information out there these days. The images that came back were pretty incredible, almost literally. But no, I mean, it's there's really no question about whether any of this stuff actually happened. We know that it did, and it's just remarkable that it did happen. Yeah.
Well, we appreciate Dr. Scott Solomon, his book, Becoming Martian, with a subtitle in there, and we'll talk about how it may change our bodies and minds. But stay tuned in hour number 2. Another exciting guest, Jon Lomberg. Who was he? He was the designer of the golden record on the Voyager spacecraft that's now going farther, as you know, Doctor, than any, not because it's habitated, than any machine from Earth. The spacecraft will reach a point where it will be one light day away from the Earth in November. More with our special guest, Dr. Scott Solomon. 1-800-848-9222. We see your phone calls coming in. Right after this break, we will continue to take you to the outer limits of space.
This is the Dr. Sky Experience. Always look to the sky. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
This is Captain Jim Lovell, an old astronaut that's made 4 very significant flights. Hopefully that the people listen in, especially the young people, will get a good education, kind of follow me in space. And it was a pleasure to be on the Dr. Sky show, and lots of luck to all of you.
The future of the human race itself may eventually depend on, can we have sex in space? That quote from theoretical physicist Dr. Michio Kaku. 32 minutes after the hour, we continue, ladies and gentlemen, celebrating the amazing triumph of Artemis II by NASA and future exploration in space. And what are the concerns? What are the hazards? And who better to talk about it is Dr. Scott Solomon, author of many books, but in this one, the entitlement book called Becoming Martian. Thank you, Doctor. We got a full board of calls, as I would imagine, a popular subject. Let's say good morning on line number 5 to Joan in Manhattan. How are you this morning, Joan?
Oh, hi. Fine, thank you. I'm wondering, first of all, what are the heat shields made of, And is it correct that when the capsule is hurtling through space towards Earth at 25,000 miles per hour, it does not heat up? Does it only heat up when it comes in contact with the atmosphere of the Earth, like friction? And then I think I understood you to say that it has to slow down from 25,000 miles an hour to 19 miles an hour.
Isn't that amazing?
And it does that in 15 minutes? That sounds almost impossible. So
It
that's
is.
question number one. How does it slow down so quickly? And the other question, I think you sort of answered a little bit. I was wondering how much time did the astronauts actually spend on the far side? Did they get a chance to see? I mean, I assume the sun shines on that side sometimes, but I don't know if they were there at that time to see the sun actually shining on it. So
Well, Joan, you bring up a whole bunch of concerns, which are all good. Doctor, if you'd like to take some of those, I think it's good, and I can add to a little of that if you would like.
Yeah, I was going to say you might be better at talking about some of the details of the heat shield and what it's actually made of. My understanding of it, again, I'm a biologist, so this is not my area of expertise. But
I totally
my understanding is that basically those materials are designed to be able to essentially convert the energy from the sort of kinetic energy from the speed that the caller was describing into heat energy. So by basically generating heat, they are actually protecting the spacecraft. But you can probably tell us more.
No, I want to add something, Doctor. And Joan, this is interesting. I'm not a metallurgist or a resin chemist or an organic chemist, but it's something called Avcoat. And it's this resin that's pressed. It's like little sections like you would put, like the space shuttle had these little tiles, but it's a little more complicated. So what happened with Artemis 1 is when it came back with the dummy on board, no people, it had some issues when it came in its re-entry. And you're right, or we were talking about this. The re-entry came in at around 32 times the speed of sound. That's 25,000 miles an hour. And in 15 minutes or after, it slowed down with parachutes to 19 miles an hour. But the problem, Joan, is with the Avcoat on there, not to say it's a bad procedure, it's just that they had some cracks because of the heat and this plasma material burrowed underneath and, chunks came off. So that's a bit of a problem. And on this one, they never did change the heat shield. And you're probably going, oh, my gosh, why didn't they do that? They came in a different trajectory, and that's a long story. So they came back safe. Hopefully, they'll check it, right, Doctor, and make sure that future ones can handle 5,000 degrees. Because can you imagine? You're sitting on your backside, and on the opposite side of the spacecraft, not too far from you, is a 5,000-degree blowtorch. Luckily, it worked. Please continue, Doctor. She had other concerns.
No, I think that was a great explanation. And yeah, as you said, they came in at a different trajectory, so that basically my understanding is they were spending a shorter amount of time in that sort of critical moment as they're, encountering the Earth's atmosphere. Last time they kind of skipped over it a little bit, and that caused them to sort of spend a longer amount of time in that window. And so, they'll learn a lot from kind of how the capsule handled it this time so that they can make sure that they make improvements for the next one.
Absolutely. And, Joan, they had about a 50-minute period of radio blackout, but they had a little bit longer time because, Joan, they were flying at about, or I should say, not flying, but sailing around the moon due to its own gravity at about 4,000 miles. So they got a longer time, but they had radio silence for about 50 minutes. And if you asked in the historical side of astronauts, people like Michael Collins on the Apollo 11 craft, imagine being by yourself going around where no humans ever had been. Joan, thank you for your questions. They're all good, and your comments. We continue, Doctor. I wanted to get on to some of the Mars mission, but we love our callers the same. Let's continue with line number 2. We welcome Robert from Philadelphia. You're on with Dr. Solomon.
Well, actually, it's good to talk to you, Dr. Sky, and your wonderful guest, Dr. Solomon, but my questions might segue into what you wanted to talk about. My concern was the long-term gamma radiation that humans would experience on a long-term space mission, and I've heard them say that water around the ship would be pretty good at ameliorating those effects. For some reason, it would absorb the gamma rays or whatever. But it makes me realize that you're talking about building bigger than you would be able to launch off of Earth. So have they come up with anything else that would be able to stop gamma radiation? And if not, or if they do, and it necessitates something very heavy, would that be another reason to build some kind of a finishing and launching base on the moon? And those were my two questions.
Very intuitive, Robert. Doctor, wow, we get great callers here, don't you think?
Absolutely, yeah. No, great questions. And yeah, the radiation issue, I think, is a really serious one for deep space missions. So if what we're talking about is, trying to reach Mars, it takes us with our current propulsion technology around 6 to 9 months to go from the Earth to Mars. And that's at the best case scenario when the two planets are at their sort of closest points in their orbits. And once we get past those Van Allen radiation belts, you are being exposed to basically the full brunt of deep space radiation. And we're talking about solar radiation as well as galactic cosmic rays. Those can cause a lot of damage to our bodies, specifically to our DNA. And so that's something that we're going to have to try to find ways to minimize. The caller raised some great questions about, can we use water or other types of materials to shield from some of that radiation? And I know there's some work on that. There's also the possibility of creating a temporary kind of a refuge within the ship. And I believe the Artemis II crew actually did a little bit of experimentation with that on this mission. But the idea would be that if there were a sudden burst of radiation, such as from the sun having, a
major flare,
right. Exactly, a flare, a coronal mass ejection. There's a little bit of warning, so they can warn the crew and say, "Hey, you need to take shelter," and they can put more material between them and the external part of the shell of the spacecraft to try to minimize the exposures.
Robert from Philadelphia, thank you. You're always intuitive and have great questions, as we love on this particular radio show, and I'm sure many others. We love critical thinking, and we love the concept of dialogue, something that many people say we don't have enough of in this world. But ladies and gentlemen, you be the judge. Before we go to the next break, Doctor, I wanted to have you, as a biologist, talk to us about space medicine. Talk a little bit about the concerns. I know you're alluding to some, but let's hear about some of the deeper concerns that we don't hear every day about long-duration space missions.
Well, we know that the astronauts that go to space experience things like getting, muscles becoming weaker, the bones become more brittle. But there's other things that happen, too. The fluids in the human body are normally pushed down to the lower body by gravity. And when you're in a lower gravity environment, those fluids are being redistributed. One of the things that seems to do is to put more pressure on the eye. And we know that astronauts that have spent a long amount of time in space, this happened to Scott Kelly during his year in space as part of the NASA Twin study.
Interesting.
That actually causes some of those thin membranes in the back of the eye to sort of buckle and fold. And that seems to be contributing to that vision deterioration, which obviously is a serious concern. There's also some evidence of cognitive effects, and we think this is at least partially caused by the radiation that we were just talking about. That's not well understood. There's some experiments on animals like rodents that have suggested that exposure to simulated galactic cosmic rays seems to kind of slow down their, the critical thinking that you were just talking about. That's so important.
Very much so.
The radiation environment seems to have an effect on that. So obviously we need to know a lot more about those things to understand what might happen to people that are living, in that deep space environment.
Well, to add what you said, Doctor, about the hazards of space from the biologic side and the medical side, I've talked to some astronauts on the space station, not on there, but after they came back, and they were describing they could hardly sleep, though they did, seeing these big flashes in the back of their retina constantly, like maybe cosmic radiation smacking the retina. That would literally drive me insane if something like that were to happen. But then again, I'm not on board and you're not on board, but the conversation continues. So let's go to the one. We got about a couple of minutes here before the next break. The concept, as Dr. Michio Kaku said, the big question of how can the human race itself, survive in space? Can we have sex in space? Yeah, I think we can. But from a biological side, let's go beyond the act of sex and let's talk about what happens to a baby that's, in nurture, right, in nurturing, all the way through its period before it's born. What are some of the hazards there and childbirth in space? A lot of things we have to consider.
That's right. And this is actually something that we know surprisingly little about. All of the steps that go from fertilization through fetal development, childbirth, and then child development, growing up, right? What happens to your body if you are growing your body, building your bones and building your muscles in a lower gravity environment? The bottom line is that we don't actually know. But if you extrapolate from what happens to adults, in which they lose bone density at a rate of about 1.5% to 2% per month.
Wow.
That seems to suggest, exactly. That seems to suggest that, bone growth would be affected. Perhaps it would be much worse for children who are first growing those bones. So I have some real concerns about whether a child born in a lower gravity environment would be able to develop a healthy body. And even if they could develop a body that was healthy enough for that environment, whether it's the moon or Mars, could they come back to Earth? If you're coming from Mars to Earth, Mars has 1/3 the gravity of Earth. If you have a weakened skeleton and then you come to a place where you weigh 3 times as much with weakened bones, that seems like that might be too much for the body to handle.
Wow. And we got to take that break, Doctor. More with Dr. Scott Hamilton. We'll do our very best to get everybody through and here to have what they have to say here about a very enticing subject, the return of Artemis and his book, Becoming Martian. How will it change our bodies and minds as we move out from the planet Earth? More on the Dr. Sky Experience when we come back.
This is the Dr. Sky Experience. Always look to the sky. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
Hi, I'm Fred Hayes, Apollo 13 lunar module pilot. I'm just happy to do a little chatting about those exciting days back on the mission, now approaching some 50 years. And you're listening to the Dr. Sky Show.
Earth is the cradle of humanity, but one cannot live in the cradle forever. Inspirational words from one of the original space pioneers, Russian space pioneer Konstantin Tsiolkovsky. 46 minutes after the hour, Dr. Scott Solomon's our guest. Let's continue with the callers. Line number 3, Steve's been patient from Lakewood. Good morning. Go ahead, Steve. You're on the air. I'm sorry, sir. Okay, I'm sorry. That's what I'm reading off the script here. Go ahead, sir, please.
They're going to, from what I heard, they're going to use the molds to build the buildings. And they're going to live in the caves, but you can't live on surface. That's what I think.
Okay.
And
Interesting.
They're going to mine the material right there with those robots to mine it.
You are right about that. There's an isotope on the moon. That's very important. I don't know about Mars, but Doctor, what the gentleman's asking here, I think, or alluding to, is fascinating about mineral resources too, and habitation modules.
Yeah, and this gets to a couple of the things about the idea of being on the moon as a priority, because look, there's potentially valuable resources that we can mine from the moon, but it's also the case that if we are going to truly live there, if we're going to be able to persist there for a long period of time, we have to rely on materials that we can get from the moon. The same will be true for Mars, right? Once we go there, it'll be even more true for Mars because it takes longer to get there, and you can only go about every 2 years. So we have to rely on what we can get from the place. In other words, we're going to have to be able to harvest the materials and resources from those places in order to be able to truly survive there.
We move on with line number 1. Frank from the Bronx is in the Theater of the Mind. You're on the air with your question or comment to good Dr. Scott Solomon.
Hi, Dr. Scott. Hi, Dr. Solomon. So this is right up what I was saying about the material. So I was thinking about going to the moon. That's a base that can less velocity, escape velocity to get to where we have to go. But when you go to Mars, first of all, I don't even know why. I understand why we explore Mars, but why go to Mars? Because when the sun goes supernova, we're going to go away and Mars is going to go away. So I don't see that in the future. But my main question is, there's no building materials, right, on Mars, right? And there's probably iron ore, but you can't make fire. And you can't build a furnace without nothing iron ore, you know?
Wow.
So,
yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Why don't we go to a world that we can actually, that has material already? Because, you know what I'm saying? I don't want to sound negative. I'm not. I love
No, you're not. You're being a realist, Frank, and that's interesting, Doctor, because you're right. How do you start fires in a mostly carbon dioxide atmosphere? But Frank from the Bronx, hey, let's hear what the good doctor has to say, and thanks for calling.
So if I understood correctly, the caller was asking, first of all, why go to Mars if the idea is that we want to survive, and we know that eventually the sun is going to take out not only Earth but Mars as well, which is an excellent point. That is very true. And I think that essentially the argument here is that eventually we will need to go beyond Mars, but we would need to first create settlements on Mars as sort of a stepping stone. In the same way that the moon is a stepping stone to Mars, Mars can be a stepping stone to even more distant planets, perhaps in other solar systems. But the idea also of having a limitation of being on Mars being that there is very little oxygen. It is true that there is not much oxygen in the atmosphere, but there is oxygen present in the form of carbon dioxide, CO2. The O2 is oxygen that can be separated from the carbon, and in the form of water ice, H2O, so that oxygen can be separated from the hydrogen in order to create oxygen that we can breathe, oxygen that we could use as propellant for rocket fuel or for furnaces, as I think the caller was suggesting.
Absolutely. Here's some additional information specifically for Frank, talking about possibilities of being on Mars and, sustaining yourself. The current weather conditions, as we do them not for here, the New York metro area or the nation, from the Curiosity rover on April 7th, which was the Sol date. That is the date on the surface of Mars, 4859. The high temperature, ladies and gentlemen, was 23 degrees Fahrenheit during the day. And at nighttime, you better warm up because it's minus 90 degrees Fahrenheit for a low. So it's an inhospitable place and a very interesting place. So let's continue. Line number 4. We'll try to get as many callers in. Mark from New York is checking in with the Theater of the Mind on the Dr. Sky Experience. You're on the air. Good morning.
I'm quite elated today. We spoke once before, and I told you that I had worked at the Goddard Institute for Space Study in New York, and I was the programmer, the young geek nerd, that actually did all the systems programming in the language BAL, Basic Assembly Language, for the 2 Voyagers. I heard you mention them earlier.
Yes, our next guest will be talking about that. You bet. That's amazing.
So many thoughts to mind as a result of your conversation. First of all, just a small piece of trivia. We know that we had the golden record attached to the exteriors of the 2 Voyagers, but there was no record player on board because it would have been too massive and taken up too much room in the internals and too much fuel to launch it to begin with. But instead, we put in IKEA-like pictographs, figuring that if E.T. was smart enough out there, if he exists, or she, to see a spacecraft, then probably he could figure out from the pictographs how to make a record player by himself with whatever materials are available with the charts, the electrical charts.
Yes,
the only thing we only included a diamond stylus for a phonograph record player. At that time, there were not yet cassette players either at all.
Well, Mark, thank you. Not to cut you short, but thank you for your contributions to the space program. And my suggestion to all the listeners, including yourself, we're looking to have Jon Lomberg on, who was the designer of the golden record on Voyager, and he's expected to join us within hour number 2. Not to cut everybody short, but let's move in to try to clear the caller board with respect to those that have waited. Good morning. On line number 5, Don from Long Beach. You're on the air with Dr. Solomon.
Hi, gentlemen. My question concerns terraforming. I can't see how we can really leave Earth without terraforming the planets that we'll be residing on. You always have to come back to Earth for something. And I know it takes a long time to do that, but it would seem to me that you want to make a planet more as conducive to life as possible to stay there and to move on, to the next planet doing the same thing. I just would like your comments.
Thank you, Don.
Yeah, the caller makes a great point that it certainly would be best if we could modify the environment on Mars to make it more Earth-like and therefore more suitable for human habitation. There have been a lot of ideas proposed, some coming from science fiction, some coming from, some very serious scientists. My understanding is that there is a possibility that we could do things like, for example, detonate nuclear devices at the poles to release some of the frozen carbon dioxide and water into the atmosphere. That would increase the density of the atmosphere and make it a little bit more suitable for plants and possibly even for ourselves. There probably still wouldn't be enough a composition of the atmosphere that would be suitable for us to be able to breathe, but you conceivably could walk around without wearing a pressure suit. You probably still need to be able to have a tank of oxygen to breathe. But here's the real challenge and the real problem with terraforming, and that is that the lack of a magnetic field on Mars means that the solar wind is constantly stripping away anything that's in its atmosphere. Yep, and that's so amazing. You're going to have to keep doing it. Yep, and you don't want to start detonating devices once you've got people living there.
In all due respect to you, Doctor, how do people get in touch with you? Because we have one more caller I'd like to get on before the end of the show, but how do people get in touch with you? And I appreciate your time. This is amazing. As I mentioned to you, it's rather difficult, I think, for any host to do a great job. Hopefully the people enjoyed this, and I did, in 1 hour with these interviews. So in the future, maybe we can do 2 hours. Well, what say you?
Yeah, that sounds great. And, I'd welcome anybody who wants to reach out to me. You can find me online. I'm on all the social media platforms. Scott Solomon, my website is solomon.rice.edu. Feel free to send me an email or reach out through social media.
Line number 2, we close out our show. Stu from Brooklyn, you've been patient. You're on with Dr. Solomon. How you doing this morning?
Yeah, good morning. I'm curious, without atmosphere and gravity, are the instruments used to measure time, like our atomic clock on Earth, and the speed of light, change for those measurements?
That's interesting. Wow, Doctor. Powerful questions from many of the guests and, many of the callers to the guest. What say you on that? Time is pretty relative, I gather, throughout the solar system, but maybe you have a better understanding of that.
Yeah, well, again, I'm merely a lowly biologist, but my understanding is that the speed of time is a universal thing. But I think an important point is that so many of the units of time that we are used to are things that are tied to the Earth, right? A day, a year. Those are things that have to do with the spinning of the Earth and the Earth's orbit around the sun. Those things are different when we go to space. And our bodies evolved to be accustomed to those things. So we have circadian rhythms and circannual rhythms that control our hormones, control different aspects of our physiology that evolved to be tied into those cues that are very much a part of the Earth. Those may change. Those are likely, I think, to change if we go to live somewhere else like Mars.
Well, Dr. Solomon, again, thank you from all of us here, the guests, the callers, and everybody else who's online, and, of course, particularly to you for great insight. We hope to do this again. And also, it all started, ladies and gentlemen, as we mentioned before, the good doctor at Rice University when President John F. Kennedy gave an empowering speech that we should, of course, set our goal to go to the moon, not because it's easy, because it's hard. And we do appreciate your time, sir. Hopefully we'll do this soon. And thank you, and hope you have a great weekend. Thanks for your time.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. This has been a lot of fun.
Always a pleasure, sir. Hour number 2, just around the corner, ladies and gentlemen. A quick sky report for those of you that, of course, depend on our navigation to show you what's in the heavens. The moon, of course, now past its last quarter phase. It moves on to its new phase as we continue on throughout the month. That moon, of course, gets thinner and thinner in the sky on the 17th as a new moon. A new comet is in the sky, visible in the early morning sky. During this next week's program, we'll give you some insightful tips of maybe how to see it, and an important meteor shower One of the best of the year, as many say, if you live in dark skies. Even city dwellers might see some, but best in the darkest of skies. The Lyrid meteor shower, which peaks on the morning of the 22nd of April. So on the night of the 21st at midnight, look to the northeast sky. A brilliant star with the naked eye is the star Vega, 25 light years away. That's the region where meteors are coming from. That concludes hour number 1. See how quick it goes as we move through time and space, and we're getting ready and warmed up for hour number 2 on the Dr. Sky Experience. And always the contact number 1-800-848-9222 or 1-800-848-WABC. We'll be right back.
Always look to the sky. The Dr. Sky Experience is on the air. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
Welcome once again, ladies and gentlemen, to hour number 2 of the Dr. Sky Experience. Amazing how fast time flies when we're all having fun in what we call the magical theater of the mind. The contact number, 1-800-848-9222, is mentioned often. Use it often because the callers rule on this particular radio show with a great guest. If you're a first-time listener, Dr. Sky Experience covers the subjects of astronomy, space, aviation, weather, celebrity guests, and stories of American exceptionalism. Thanks again to our helmsmen, Tony and Bill, because, you know, folks, without them, this may not sound as good as you're hearing it right now. So we appreciate them. Thanks to Dr. Scott Solomon for talking with us about becoming Martian. And what a great weekend to celebrate some amazing feats with American space technology, the safe return of this mission of the Artemis II crew, traveling nearly 700,000 miles. If you're a person of exactitude, they traveled 694,481 miles, and a pretty much flawless mission around the far side of the moon. But if you think that's a great distance, and it surely is a great compliment to NASA and the astronauts, can you imagine, ladies and gentlemen, what the farthest man-made object is right now in space? And that title goes to the Voyager 1 spacecraft. And as we continue with our very special guest for hour number 2, yes, I'm sure you'll find him most engaging. Jon Lomberg is an American space artist and science journalist. He was Carl Sagan's principal artistic collaborator for more than 20 years on many projects from 1972 to 1996. In 1998, the International Astronomical Union officially named asteroid 6446 Lomberg in recognition of his achievements in science communication. His story continues to talk about this amazing project that NASA, back in 1977, sent 2 spacecraft, 2 robotic spacecraft that continued to move outward from the Earth and the Sun in 2 opposite directions. We're finding out now that the great distance of Voyager 1 is nearly 16 billion miles away from the Earth. And in November, on November 15, 2026, the spacecraft will officially be 1 light day away. That's 16.1 billion miles. 24 hours it takes the signal. If you said, do this, and sent it out into space, it takes some 24 hours to get there. Let's hear a little bit about the historic side of the Voyager spacecraft as we hear what a Hollywood rendition would sound like about this amazing achievement, and then our special guest, Jon Lomberg. Here's how it sounds.
There's a machine dying in the darkness, nearly 16 billion miles from Earth, farther than anything humans have ever sent. It's alone, colder than you can imagine. Its transmitter runs on about 22 watts, the same power as a refrigerator light bulb. And it's still trying to send a signal home. A radio signal takes almost 24 hours to reach Earth. A whisper from the edge of the solar system, telling us it's still there, still moving, still alive. But it's dying. One by one, its instruments are shutting down. Its power is fading. Sometime in the 2030s, the signal will stop. And it will drift into the void, silent, forever. We launched it in 1977, sent it past Jupiter, past Saturn, past the edge of everything we knew. Tonight, we're following Voyager 1, the loneliest object in the universe, the farthest messenger humanity has ever sent, and the last signal it will ever send from the edge of home.
The legacy of Voyager 1 continues on the Dr. Sky Experience. In the lonely darkness of space, the Voyager continues, as mentioned often and proudly, because of the scientists, both men and women, who made this possible. We now go across the ocean to the great state of Hawaii and welcome our special guest for hour number 2, Jon Lomberg. Jon, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. You are in Hawaii, and I imagine it's just early evening there. Thanks for being with us.
You're welcome.
Yes, sir. What an amazing story. You know, it's so hard for me to even think where to start on this, but I guess I'll just take a stab at it. Sitting here on my desk is a copy of a book that was very hard for me to find. As you know so well, your name's emblazoned on the front, Murmurs of Earth, the Voyager Interstellar Record. Carl Sagan, Dr. Drake, Ann Druyan, Timothy Ferris, you, and Linda Salzman Sagan. What an honor to be able to speak with you. Tell us your involvement about this whole subject, because just in case people don't know what we're talking about, there is this golden record on both Voyager 1 and 2. How did you get started with this? I think this is amazing.
My story is the story of a person who, from a very early age, had a dream and a kind of knowledge of what I was here to do. And some people are born to play soccer, and some people are born to play the cello. But I feel I was born to try to communicate with aliens. It's something that interested me for as long as I can remember, and got me into astronomy and science and biology and a lot of other things, ultimately into art. But the common theme in a lot of my art had to do with our vision of ourselves, not just as beings on a planet, but as beings in a galaxy with other beings sharing it. And early in my career, and fairly early in his, I got hooked up with Carl Sagan and worked together with him for a long time. And that was really the thing that brought us together, and the dream that we shared, that we were now living in a time when it was possible with technology to think about actually communicating with aliens. The preferred way to do that was with radio waves, because they travel at the speed of light. They're easy to make. And Carl was working with Frank Drake, who was the father of the efforts to find radio signals from elsewhere. So the two of them were tremendously inspirational to me, and I worked with both of them. And when the time came to make this message for aliens, the Voyager Golden Record, they asked me to be part of the team to make it.
That's amazing. I mean, just by chance, I mean, this wasn't your plan. You didn't wake up one day, and though I did hear you clearly about your fascination with life out in the universe, but it must have been an amazing experience. I mean, I had the honor of visiting Dr. Sagan at Cornell one time, and he was very kind to me, but very busy. But describe this man to us, because you know, so many people know, and maybe a lot of young people listening right now to the Dr. Sky Experience here on WABC, they may have no idea really his legacy. And talk to us a little bit about the man from your perspective. I think this is important to set the stage for what we'll talk about with the Golden Record.
Carl was a once-in-a-generation figure who had an astounding ability to communicate complicated topics in a way that ordinary people could understand. His great passion was astronomy and the planets and the search for life on other planets. That informed his whole career, and he became known in media for TV shows. He was a very prominent author of one of the best-selling science books of all time, and influenced a whole generation of people to not only be interested in space science, but to actually go into it, whether into astronomy or the space program on some level. But a lot of people I meet still tell me that they trace their calling, their vocation back to influence by Carl Sagan.
Absolutely. I mean, watching the television show when I was in school way back when, I remember watching this and I was just so amazed that, the man had a certain way of presenting his topic that, it wasn't like he was in your face. It was more of a calm, relaxing episode if you watched. And certainly we recommend people go watch the original iteration of Cosmos. But this is interesting to me because I study science and astronomy and the subjects there. Many, many hours behind the telescope and the deep sky stuff that we could talk about. But you're an artist from profession, and this is interesting. I wonder if you'd comment, because I had the privilege and honor of knowing a number of other space artists too, but do you have an opportunity to share with us Chesley Bonestell? I mean, that as an artist, as an individual, really just blew me away. If you look at what looked like 1960s or 50s space art, any comment on Chesley Bonestell for people to look his name up? I think they'll learn something too.
Well, Bonestell was the father of a whole genre of art, which was trying to get photographs where we couldn't get them for real, specifically the other planets. He visualized what the surfaces of the other planets would be like using the best scientific knowledge of his day, and he had awesome skills as an illustrator and manipulator of light and shadow, and was able to work with some of the early space scientists who were developing the space program in the United States, and his work appeared in Collier's and other magazines, and in books by Willy Ley, one of the German scientists who developed our space program, and really allowed people to visualize what the solar system might be like. And for most people, especially up until his time, their view of reality was very centered on the Earth and limited to the Earth. The idea that there were these other places, and they weren't like fantasy worlds, they were real places. You could go to them and would go to them someday, was the kind of perspective-shifting experience that missions to the moon are. It just makes you just change your perspective. And a lot of the artists working today in similar fields would trace some of their influence back to Bonestell.
Jon Lomberg's our special guest. Who is he? He's a space artist, but more important, ladies and gentlemen, to this conversation, one of the designers of this interesting subject matter on Voyager, both Voyager 1 and 2, this golden record. My book here, if you can find it, ladies and gentlemen, is a real testimonial to the backstory called Murmurs of Earth, the Voyager Interstellar Record. And it goes on to describe what you're going to hear here on the Dr. Sky Experience. Callers, we're opening up in the Theater of the Mind, as we like to call it. You have an opportunity to speak with a man who participated and still continues to talk about this great subject. 1-800-848-9222, 1-800-848-WABC. Just two other space artists. I was very much in contact with Robert McCall here in Arizona before he passed away, I believe back in 2010. And that's another interesting space artist, if you don't mind commenting. He also has, some of his artwork in the Smithsonian. As you also, I believe, have one of the most incredible maps artistically of our Milky Way galaxy. Talk about that one from the Milky Way. You did that, and that's amazing if people see the details.
Well, I share the honor with Bob McCall of having done a mural for the Air and Space Museum. His was permanent. Mine was up for 10 years as part of a gallery. It's now in storage. But he was one of the great visualizers of the American space program. He worked closely with NASA and did many paintings of astronauts and missions, and his remarkable mural celebrating the Apollo landing is in the lobby of the National Air and Space Museum, and is probably one of the most viewed murals in the world. And he also had a tremendous influence on those artists whose interest was more in aviation and the nuts and bolts of designing spacecraft and how the spacecraft work. You know, the space world is very big. You have astronomy, you have a science fiction,
Sure.
you have the space program, and people are into all different parts of it. But Bob McCall was really emblematic of the space program in the 60s.
Well, John, one final space artist, and then we'll move on to the subject at hand in detail, and we appreciate you being with us. From his tropical paradise in Hawaii, as you can probably hear in the background, right, John? It sounds like there's an amazing paradise with birds in the background, and it must be a beautiful evening just about now, I guess, in Hawaii, as always, a beautiful place to celebrate peace and happiness. But the other space artist that I knew, and he passed away suddenly too early at age 65 from a very serious disease. I don't know if you were familiar with Kim Poor. He, of course, in Tucson was also a well-respected space artist. I don't know if you had any contact or knew of him, just to mention him in passing.
Kim was a friend. Yeah, I knew Kim. We were both founding members of the group called the IAAA, which was the International Association of Astronomical Artists. And these were a lot of the people, as I was mentioning, who were influenced by Bonestell and wanted to do the same. But one of the nice things about space art is that the material is always new, at least for our generation, that we knew more about the planets than Bonestell did. And so his work is not obsolete, but it's not the final word. It had to be updated as the science was updating, and that was kind of the role of these artists. And Kim was one of that generation. He started a business in Tucson called Nova Graphics, which was a place where a lot of space artists showed their work. Him and his wife, Sally. And, his passing was a real loss to the space art community.
Absolutely. We go to Space Fest in Tucson at the beautiful Marriott, whatever the name it was, a beautiful resort. But I mentioned him in passing as a tribute to another great space artist. Let's go back to Carl Sagan and the conversation at hand. And I'd like to get the audience involved here. Ladies and gentlemen, a rare opportunity to speak to someone whose legacy will continue on through all time, the development of the golden record on board Voyagers 1 and 2. This is interesting, John. I read that Carl Sagan, when he was a young boy, visited the New York City World's Fair. And we know, I wasn't around, but knowing that there was a thing there called the World of Tomorrow, I guess was one of the main themes. And they developed a time capsule there, or created one, by Westinghouse, and they actually buried it there in the Flushing Meadows, and it was supposed to be open, or will be open, in the year 6939, 5,000 years after it was buried, September 23rd, 1938. So why am I mentioning that to the audience? The connection of this particular subject, the golden record, is what? A time capsule of not just the area of New York and the people of the world, but this is a monument that goes on forever for all mankind. How can something like that be, that's just amazing. People can't miss this, and I hope they don't.
Well, I'm working on a book with two fellow authors right now, and one of the things we're trying to examine is the enduring significance of this project. In your opening, you spoke about how lonely Voyager was. I would have to disagree with that. Voyager isn't alone. We're all with it. Millions of people around the world who have heard of the golden record and cherish the golden record feel a part of it, because even though the instruments are shutting down and the exploratory part of the mission is over, our part of the mission is just starting. So Voyager is not a dead spacecraft with no mission. It carries this, what I think of as a gold medal for Earth.
Wow.
It's the kind of gold medal we've made for ourselves to show the universe who we were, because by the time this is ever found, we'll be long gone. But one of my co-authors, Dina Weibel, is an anthropologist, and she's studied the effect that space has in introducing the concept of awe to people, and how that is a paradigm-shifting and a brain-changing experience. And space seems able to inspire that experience, and certain things in space inspire it in people more easily than others that are more technical and scientific. And the golden record has a universal appeal. everybody understands what it can mean. You try to make a message, and everybody can have an opinion on what should be on the message. So people can feel involved with it and have felt involved with it. It's become iconic. The record cover that I designed, that Frank Drake and I designed and I drew, which is really playing instructions for the record, has become one of the most recognized symbols almost of the space age and of our exploration into space.
Sure. That's amazing. Jon Lomberg is with us, ladies and gentlemen. One of the co-designers working on the golden record on board Voyagers 1 and 2. And again, I appreciate you correcting the audio that we had, because that was a Hollywood iteration. But who better than the person who designed it can give us the spirit of what's on board Voyager, that we're all there and for all time. But in the moments that we have here, ladies and gentlemen, you have an opportunity to ask your questions about how did this record come about? What's on board this record, as we'll get into, and maybe your questions about the Voyager spacecraft that continues to go out into the deep space. And this is correct, and I just checked this, and I hope that you can corroborate it. November 15th of this year, the Voyager 1 should reach the 1 light day distance of what, John? About 16.1 billion miles away from the Earth. And that may not seem significant to anyone, but it takes light in the radio form 24 hours. Imagine that, trying to tell a robotic craft to do something. You have to wait a whole day to know that you have to wait backwards 2 days to make sure it had the received signal and sent it back. That's amazingly distant.
It's very distant and significant to me for another reason. If you're interested in going out to the stars, light years are your unit. They're your miles. Right. And if it's taken 50 years to go 1 day, think how many years it'll take to go a light year. And that's only 1 light year, which isn't even a quarter of a distance to the nearest star. So it helps put the scale of the stars in perspective with all this time for 50 years going as fast as any object has ever gone.
That is incredible.
1 light day.
And just to corroborate, ladies and gentlemen, just from this side of the house, if you go 1 light year away, you're talking 5,880 billion miles, and not to take away the great achievement of the NASA astronauts on Artemis 2 going around the far side of the moon. That's just mind-boggling, John. And, if you go to the Webb Space Telescope concept of galaxies that are seen that are billions of light years away, it just kind of makes me feel as a human that we're a tiny little speck in the big soup of the cosmos. How would you feel about that? Yeah,
I tell you, I live on an island that's a tiny little speck in the middle of the big ocean, but it doesn't oppress me. Like, you do feel small when you're on an island, and you are small, but at the same time, the island is huge. These two things are true, and there are other islands. And, in fact, some people say that the settlement of Polynesia by the Polynesian people, who found all the inhabitable islands in the Pacific and settled them all, that's the best analog we have for what the coming exploration of space may be when mankind moves out to the planets and settles them. The travel times will be similar, and the isolation will be similar, and the different cultures will grow up in a similar way as happened in the Pacific.
Your quick analysis of Artemis 2, I mean, in your mind, not only being a space artist, but somebody involved in this discussion as we get into the details of the Golden Record, your response to what just happened about 24 hours ago?
To be honest, I'm torn.
Okay.
Part of me is celebrating it as the inspiring event it was, and I think it was an important event. Having a woman aboard, having a person of color aboard was tremendously important to a lot of people. People I've spoken to have emphasized to me how much it meant to women, especially, that there was a woman on board doing that. And I think that's important. I also think in a world full of bad news, the good news that this story represented, the technical achievement and the the danger of it and the relief we all felt when they splashed down safety, a great human epic and a positive human epic. And we need as many of those as we can get, and anything that can make people feel better about the world and our society and what we can accomplish if we just get our act together, it's a great symbol. Having said that, as an Apollo veteran, there is a sense of been there, done that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Capsule on a launcher that wasn't reusable that ended up splashing down in the ocean. Well, after Apollo, we did shuttle. We were supposed to be evolving away from that to reusable spacecraft and landing on the ground. So the mission profile seems a bit of a remake. And in Apollo, it's a miracle that they did this. In Artemis, it's more, if we don't do this, we're going to look like idiots if after 60 years we still couldn't do it. Like we kind of had to do it. And we did, right. But there wasn't that sense of pulling off the impossible. It was sort of like, you better be able to do this at this point with all the improved technology and the amount of money that was spent on the program. And plus, if you really want to get down to the nitty-gritty, if what you're interested in is science and establishing human activity on the moon, you can do that with robots. You can explore the planets with robots. You can do so much more on Mars without, the tremendously hard problem of getting somebody there for much less than it costs to send people. We really only are sending the people for the very important symbolic value of it. But at a time when science is so under attack and the space science budget of NASA has been so cut into, and we lost the Mars sample return, which was such an important mission, and so much money had been spent on gathering the samples, waiting to be picked up.
You're right about that one, John. That's right. That mission, we're collecting something, but we need to bring it back to learn about it, right?
So if I take a narrow focus, and the mission was great, I felt great about it, and good for everybody. If I take a larger view, I still think the space program has a lot of issues to deal with.
Agreed. I mean, obviously nothing's perfect, but in this short celebratory time for the world celebrates, we certainly appreciate the astronauts and what they've done in space. And ladies and gentlemen, the gateway, as we call it, in the Theater of the Mind to get in touch with Jon Lomberg is very simple. Give us a call, 1-800-848-9222, or other dialing numbers or ways to get in, 1-800-848-WABC. So after this break, in about 2 or 3 minutes, I just wanted to ask your kindness if we can talk about the mechanics of the Golden Record so people can actually understand the great technology that we have there. Because back then, we're talking 1960s and 70s specifically technology when it was launched in 1977, the 2 missions. This is fascinating that if there is an alien civilization out there, and they do happen to retrieve this craft somehow, there is a way for them, I'm sure, hopefully they're super intelligent, or the ability to know how to use a stylus, and the concept that we had, and many people still love their LP records. I certainly do, and that's an interesting subject to talk about here. John, it's an honor to have you here, and I know it's a subject that it's near and dear to you and so many of the space scientists. So one quick comment about Carl Sagan in about a minute. Just tell us, because a lot of people never knew him, and they really, let's not forget, a great scientist.
Carl and I were not only colleagues, we were friends. We were good friends for 25 years, and we had a lot of fun together. And everybody knows how smart he was and how eloquent he was, but the one thing that didn't come through as much in most of his appearances was how funny he was. Some of that came through on his appearances on the Carson show, but he could crack up a room full of people, and he loved to laugh, and he loved to make you laugh, and he was just, as a friend, I miss him a lot, and what I miss is not so much the great intellectual conversations we had, but just the fun we had, joking around and laughing and being.
Well, more with Jon Lomberg. Sorry to cut you short, sir. The rules here are we have this break, and we call it in radio the hard break at the bottom of the hour. When we return, we'll get into the details of the golden record on board Voyagers, and we're listening to a man who's telling us the story behind this amazing story. The Golden Record, a book, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to look for it. Murmurs of Earth, the Voyager Interstellar Record. Many authors, including our special guest, Jon Lomberg. We will be right back.
This is the Dr. Sky Experience. Always look to the sky. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
This is David Hedison, the actor. You've seen me as Captain Lee Crane on Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, also as The Fly, also as Felix Leiter with Roger Moore on Live and Let Die, and Timothy Dalton on License to Kill. And you're listening to Dr. Sky.
The reality is the majority of us will not get off this planet. So in the long run, some kind of space exploration has to benefit us here on the Earth. A quote from retired astronaut Mae Jemison. Jon Lomberg is our special guest, the designer, with his team and Carl Sagan and others on this incredible journey, the Voyager 1 and 2 spacecraft, but more important to the topic, the Voyager Interstellar Record on board. Welcome back, Jon. Thank you. Take us down the path of what's on this record, and maybe even before that. How did this concept come about? I mean, people were sitting in a room. How did it all say or get started to say, wow, we ought to put something on there to talk about humanity's, legacy?
Carl Sagan and his colleague Frank Drake did a plaque for an earlier spacecraft called Pioneer, and this plaque showed a map of the Earth, of where the Earth was in the galaxy, a pulsar map, and a drawing of a man and a woman with the man's arms raised in greeting, and some other things too, drawn by Linda Sagan, Carl's wife. And it was the first interstellar message sent outside the solar system, the first message artifact, and it was actually one of the things that inspired me to get in touch with Carl and write him a letter, which began our long relationship. And it had a big impact. So when the Voyager mission was being designed, one of the Voyager project managers said, do you want to put a similar plaque on Voyager? And Carl said, sure. But when he spoke to Frank about it, Frank said, for similar size and weight, instead of a metal plaque, we could put a phonograph record, a metal phonograph record, and inscribe all kinds of information on that. And that was the first of many brilliant ideas that Frank Drake contributed to the record. In a technical sense, it was really his project. And the notion of making a record had obvious advantages and then some that weren't so obvious. The obvious advantages were you could record music. And Frank was also, and sounds, and music and sounds would be two of the things that if you wanted to give aliens, the idea being if these spacecraft, which leave the solar system and drift forever, are ever found, the aliens who find it will want to know who sent it. And the purpose of the Golden Record is to tell them who made this spacecraft and about our planet. So music was one thing that seemed a good way to be able to show the variety of cultures on Earth. And sound could give a lot of sounds that maybe could be understandable by aliens who had experienced similar sounds of rain and wind and thunder and surf and such things. Frank felt we could record pictures on it in some way. And another audio thing we could record were people actually saying hello, people giving greetings in different languages of Earth, and put all of these together on a phonograph record. It was relatively cheap. It involved some new technology. Nobody had ever recorded pictures on a record before. This was pre-digital. This was not a video disc. These were video signals from old cathode ray television technology, video signals encoded on the disc.
No, it's amazing, John, because something I'm studying called raster scans, as you're talking about pictures from recorded signals. I mean, you're right. If today, with all the chips that we have here, semiconductors, all this could have put into a thumb drive, I'm sure. But this is amazing because we're listening to a story, ladies and gentlemen, that defies the description of the technology of the day. So it's like an LP, a 12-inch record. And I understand, see if I'm correct on this, it has a stylus that you would use like a regular phonograph if found by intelligent civilization. So what would you do? You'd put it on a turntable without the record player, and it would transmit from those grooves actual images if you hooked it up to like a video screen? Is that a fair statement?
Well, the easiest thing for them to do, and one of the things that makes this such a good technology over, say, a thumb drive, where retrieving the data and displaying it is very complicated. With an LP, if you put the needle on it and spin the record, the sound comes out. You don't need any technology more than that to make it happen.
What
the function of the needle and everything else is just to make it louder and clearer. But we did an experiment in school with an old record you don't care for, put a safety pin in it, and put a pencil through the record and spin the record and hold the safety pin in it, and you will hear the music.
Amazing.
So it's a very transparent technology compared to anything digital. So that's one thing that made it good. Another thing that made it good was it was very durable. Tapes can be erased. Magnetic storage can be erased. But the grooves of a record, as long as the record, a metal record inside a metal box, as long as that stays intact, the information is preserved. So it lasts for, thousands of millions of years.
An incredible story we're digging in with our special guest, Jon Lomberg, one of the designers with the team, with Carl Sagan of the Golden Record on Voyager. Let's go to the callers right now. You're lighting up the phone lines. Line number 1, good morning to George from Putnam County. You're on with designer and space artist Jon Lomberg. How you doing, George?
Oh, gentlemen, tremendous show. You guys are awesome. My motto is never get in the way of creativity. And also the AM signal, it just travels and keeps traveling. So if it's left this galaxy, the Milky Way, maybe you guys are being heard somewhere else. But AM signal is powerful. And also, I'd just like to say the technology is awesome. Whether we're rescuing pilots that were downed or we're building new medical technology, our spaceships or everything, compare a spaceship from the 60s to today is just not even comparable. But the thing is that I always emphasize, and I'm really truly do. You see the way these pilots were pulled out? That technology, do we want to turn it over to the third world? Do we want to turn it over to Omar, Khalid, and Cortez? Because when someone in the left becomes president, our secrets, everything is in their hands then. And they have it, and we don't know who they're going to give it to. So I'm all for creativity. Let's move forward. Artificial intelligence, I believe, will solve a lot of diseases that have plagued this world and this country for years now. But the thing is, who's going to be in control of that technology, and what will they do with it? Do you want the third world America to have it?
No, you're right, George. But I think, staying on measure here, I think George has got a lot of open opinions on things. But the point is, the technology then, if you look at what today is, it's just incredible that back in the 70s, I'm just literally blown out of my chair with what's going on with this golden record. So please continue here. Embedded into this particular record, approximately how many images are there? And let's talk a little bit about that, plus music. Here's the real question that I have for you, and I never got an answer, so I'm going to try tonight and this morning. How the heck do you start to know what to put in this thing if you're under a time constraint? You're going to libraries, running around looking at books. You didn't have access to major computers. That's amazing to do in such a short time.
One of the astonishing things about the project was how short a time we had to do it. When I came on board and the team was put together, there had been a lot of discussion about the physical nature of the record and how do you actually make a metal record, but no contents had been selected. And all the contents had to be found and selected within 6 weeks. 6 weeks. Think about that.
That's crazy. I mean, really, that's insane. How do you do it?
What
I
made
mean,
it
you
possible
did it.
was that we kind of hit the ground running. Carl and Frank and I had been talking about these things for years. In fact, I had written a paper about why aliens might enjoy music and what sort of music they'd be most likely to enjoy. A paper that was read by Carl and Frank and other people in the SETI community. So there had already been some discussion of this. And one of the first things we did was ask a bunch of people in this widespread community that was talking about communicating with aliens, what do you think we should show? And we got different opinions on specific topics that we should show, and some of the more general, what the spirit of the message should be. For example, everybody seemed to agree that the message should not be a message from NASA or a message from the United States. It should be a message from planet Earth. So there had to be that tone to it.
Totally amazing.
And
totally amazing
that we should emphasize things like our children, our relationship with our children.
Yes. I find it totally mind-boggling because, folks, still time. If you have concerns about this, think about what John's talking about here. And again, a monumental thing, a technology of the day, still going out into deep space and will continue. And it has no specific location in the star system that it was actually aimed at, Voyager 1 and 2. They will pass somewhat near, in the big astronomical sense, certain stars and star systems in the past. But what should be the most amazing thing is, since our astronauts have gone to the distance ever as humans, and it's a great accomplishment, when you're at 16.1 billion miles away from the Earth, the light day transmission, location, can you imagine the stars at being like even Alpha Centauri and Proxima, 4.1 or 2 light years? It would take, 40, 50,000 years just for Voyager to get there. And that, to me, is just mind-boggling. Your questions and comments, ladies and gentlemen, still time. We have this break coming up right now. 1-800-848-9222. Don't be shy. Get in the queue in the Theater of the Mind. The theater is open. And our special guest, Jon Lomberg, a book that I wholeheartedly recommend, if indeed you can still find it, Murmurs of Earth, the Voyager Interstellar Record, goes into great detail. We'll be right back with our last segment as we move to the top of hour number 2.
This is the Dr. Sky Experience. Always look to the sky. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
I bring you a warning. Every one of you listening to my voice, tell the world. Tell this to everybody wherever they are. Watch the skies everywhere. Keep looking. Keep watching the skies.
Untouched by worldly events here on the Earth, the Voyagers, bearing the memories of a world that would one day be no more, will continue to fly on. Inspirational words from Carl Sagan. 47 minutes after the hour, we continue with our guest, Jon Lomberg, so much involved with the golden record on the Voyager spacecrafts that are heading out to deep space. Let's continue with the callers. Line number 2, we welcome Martin from upstate New York. Good morning, Martin. How you doing?
Good morning, Dr. Sky. This is a great show, as always.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's amazing what they're talking about, the extraterrestrials and the information that may be coming out.
Sure.
I don't know.
Hope.
I hope so. Yeah. I like to hear about this. But as far as this, when was this thing launched in 1977?
Let John continue, Martin. I appreciate let our guest John explain, because he was involved so much of this. He's got a lot with his hand signature on the golden record. John, please continue.
Yeah, the launch was in 1977. There were 2 launches about a month apart because there are 2 Voyager spacecraft that are now going in different directions toward the stars. I want to say a bit about the book you're mentioning, Murmurs of Earth. That's the book that the team that put the record together that we wrote just after the record. It's the best account of it, but it's out of print. You can still find it online in used bookstores. But I'm working on a book now called Voyager's Golden Record, which will be a perspective on the record from 50 years later, and considering its cultural and other significance. So that book will be out next year, which is the 50th anniversary of the launches of Voyager. So if people remember between now and then, that's where they can read more about this story.
Martin, you have a follow-up, or you're still with us? We got a minute or two, so please continue. I guess Martin's not there. Anyway, what's interesting here is what you just mentioned to me, John. I'm going to make sure I hold this book very near and dear to me, because I had a hard time finding this. And of all places, not to diminish the book, I found it at a used bookstore just looking at this on the shelf, and I picked it up for a good price. And even the cover, the jacket on here, is like it was never touched by human hands. But now I touched it.
You're very lucky. You're very lucky. But yeah, you can still find them. It wasn't I don't know if it qualified as a bestseller, but it sold a lot. Mm-hmm. So there are a lot of copies of it in libraries. That's where people maybe can find it most easily.
Yes, but one of the things I want to mention from the trivia file, and I want you to elaborate on this, there is indeed, at the very ending of what I'm reading here, Carl Sagan's son Nick, when he was 6 years old, he actually did a voice iteration that's on there saying, quote, "Hello from the children of planet Earth." I mean, that's amazing. And his son is also involved as an author, a science fiction writer, and also involved in film. He's a very successful man.
That's right. Nick Sagan was 6 when we made the record, and his mother, Linda Sagan, was in charge of gathering people saying hello in different languages, and they found them in the Cornell community where there are people from all over the world. And for English, she and Carl decided to have Nick give the greeting, and Nick didn't write it. They wrote it for him, but the greeting was "Hello from the children of planet Earth," which he read in a very cute voice. And he did grow up to become a science fiction writer.
That's amazing. I don't tell a lot of stories about myself because the time, of course, is limited, but with broadcaster Hugh Downs about 20 years ago, I was invited down to the ABC studios here in Phoenix to do something called The Special Message to the Stars. And Hugh Downs was sitting there with me, and I was sitting next to him. I introduced him on something that was sent out by a giant radio telescope out to deep space. And he, of course, the star of the show, I was the introduction person. All I know is we're still out there going out in space, John. So in addition to the golden record, now that, now that Hugh Downs has passed on, well, if any aliens come out there, they might want to remind me, they might come and see me. But more important than that, let's talk about the other things about the golden record before the clock runs out. How many images are on there? And we have a ton of music on there. Just an amazing feat of technology, as I've often said here. And you were so honored to be part of that.
116 images from all over the world showing a lot of the things you probably guess we'd show: mountains, animals, trees, cities, people doing a lot of different kinds of things. And I think it's, I shouldn't remember this number, 30 pieces of music, 54 languages giving greetings, and a large number of sounds of Earth.
It's amazing. And with a budget, some say $18,000. I don't know if that's true or if it's $1,800. I'm still amazed. I keep repeating it because it is incredible. I don't know how anybody in the day before digital stuff like the internet, you have to find all these pictures. So what did you have, like a committee that said, nah, we don't want that one, we want this one?
No,
and then I understand.
Mostly, as far as the pictures go, it was mostly me and Frank. But Frank was working mostly on the technical end of how do we put these pictures on the record in the first place, and designed a dictionary that's part of the record, part of the image sequence that teaches the aliens about mathematics and how to read the following record. But as far as the pictures of Earth, that was mostly my pick. If it was a film, I was the director.
Amazing. An honor to you and all the people that helped put this together. Tell me about this. I've read, and I want to hear it from the source, that there was a request to put a Beatles song, Here Comes the Sun, and it was rejected. And then there was also a concern about full frontal nudity done in a professional manner to show what a human female and a human male would look like. And there was always that didn't happen. But on Pioneer, it shows the engraving of those. Is that true about both the Beatles song and about the nudity images that the NASA didn't want to see put on there? Or who knows? You can tell us.
Both those stories are true. The Beatles agreed personally, but they didn't own their music, and I was in the office when BMI, their music company, called, and a vice president patiently explained to me that they just didn't allow Beatles music on other labels. And so Tim Ferriss got the brilliant idea of, instead of the Beatles, using Chuck Berry and sending Johnny B. Good out there.
How cool is that?
Yeah, and it seemed like if you're going to show what people are like, you have to show what people are like, right?
Exactly.
So
right.
We found a beautiful picture, very tasteful and
sure.
Of a nude couple where the woman was pregnant. It fit nicely into a sequence of how humans reproduce. But that was the one picture that NASA wouldn't let us send.
Amazing. It's amazing,
even
back then.
There was other nudity on the record. So it was an inconsistent thing, but this one was just too in your face. So
yeah, and you've scoured how many editions and iterations of the National Geographic magazine, I'm sure, right, from start to finish?
Well, we couldn't do image searches on the Internet, so it was much harder. We worked with National Geographic, looking through their magazine, and they opened some files to us. But mostly I was searching through books and magazines, and I had a list of topics I was trying to find pictures of and trying to check things off my list and looking at as many different things as I can.
Jon Lomberg, as we close out hour 2 here, what do you want people to know and remember about your work on Voyager 1 as it moves toward, in November of this year, the incredible distance of about 16.1 billion miles, and that is one light day away? What do you want people to remember about the mission and your contributions to the Golden Record?
I want people to remember Voyager as the most successful mission NASA ever flew. And I say that even compared to Apollo 11. It showed us more new stuff. It performed so incredibly well, still performing 50 years later, and changed our whole view of the solar system. So it was a privilege to be a little tag-on to the great Voyager mission. Nobody thought too much about the record at the time when the mission was launched, and we were all busy paying attention to the planets it was discovering. But as being kind of the last working instrument, so to speak, on the mission, it was just a tremendous honor for me to be involved. But what's important is that we did it. We made this message and we sent it to the stars, and it represents all of us as far as we were able to make it comprehensive. And
thank you, John.
Nobody can change that.
No, Jon Lomberg, an honor and a distinct privilege to listen to the story of some amazing feats of technology on a mission that continues. Thank you for your time, and I hope you have a good evening there in the beautiful state of Hawaii. As I can hear in the background, it sounds like a lot of happy birds continuing to
They're
chirp.
turkey frogs, actually. But
oh, they are. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I wouldn't be on the Voyager vocal side if I couldn't identify it correctly. Thank you, sir, for your time. We appreciate you, and we look forward to staying in touch. And when you get the new book, let us know so we can get more information from you. Appreciate your time,
Thanks,
sir.
Steve.
Have a good evening. Bye.
Bye.
Voyager 1, ladies and gentlemen, if you're looking in the deep sky, it's heading in the direction of the constellation Ophiuchus, often referred to as the 13th sign of the zodiac, a summer sky object, but no, you couldn't see it even with one of the most powerful telescopes. Voyager 2, heading in the opposite direction in the heavens, in a star field called Pavo, the Peacock, a southern constellation, again, some 13 billion miles away from us, but the big monumental moment is when it reaches the one light day event. Can you imagine what that spacecraft can see if its eyes were open like you and I? And where's it headed? Remember, a Star Trek voyage and a Star Trek episode talked about the Voyager spacecraft as it came back as something called Voyager. check out that complete movie from Star Trek as they talk about the Voyager spacecraft. Again, ladies and gentlemen, thanks to our helmsmen, Tony and Bill, for navigating us through the time and space continuum. Next week, as always, more great guests from the realms of astronomy, space, aviation and weather, and stories of American exceptionalism. And we pray for peace. And we obviously hope that you, ladies and gentlemen, have a good morning, clear skies, great health, and happiness. And now we pass the torch of conversation over to Walter Sterling on another side of midnight as he takes you deeper into the morning here on the Powerhouse Blowtorch, Talk Radio 77 WABC.